I couldn't find my new, expensive deodorant until I saw it in the bathroom. And what else am I supposed to clean the toilet brush with? It smells just like lemon, laughed my mother-in-law. I silently took the empty bottle and went to my room. But the next morning, when my mother-in-law came out of the shower, she screamed so loudly that all the neighbors came running. Before we continue, please tell me which country you are from and how old you are. We really enjoy getting to know our audience. Don't forget to subscribe and hit like. Enjoy listening. Molly loved the scent of lemon verbena. That fresh, slightly bitter aroma reminded her of childhood, of her grandmother's garden, where fragrant herbs grew under the hot southern sun. Her grandmother had passed away 5 years ago, and the small, heavy bottle of French deodorant that she had gifted Molly for her 18th birthday had remained her most treasured possession. It wasn't just deodorant. It was an anchor connecting her to a carefree past, a symbol of love and care. That's why she only used it on special occasions, stretching the precious drops over years. Today was not a special occasion. Today was an ordinary Tuesday, the 3rd month of her new temporary life in her mother-in-law's apartment. And this Tuesday was no different from the previous ones. It was filled with the smell of bleach, sterile cleanliness, and quiet, unspoken tension. 3 months ago, she and Alex, her husband, had made what seemed like a sensible decision. Instead of continuing to pay for a rented one-bedroom on the outskirts of Chicago, they would move in with his mother, Dolores. Her spacious 3-room apartment in the city center seemed like the perfect springboard for saving money for a down payment on a mortgage. "We'll tough it out for a year," Alex said, hugging his wife. "But then we'll buy our own little nest, big and bright." Molly agreed. She loved Alex and was ready to endure temporary inconveniences for their shared future. She could never have imagined that these inconveniences would turn into daily psychological torture. Dolores, a former school deputy principal, was a woman of strict habits. Everything in her home followed a rigid schedule: up at 6, breakfast at exactly 7:30, cleaning on schedule. Dust was her personal enemy, and disorder, a mortal sin. Molly, who worked as a remote web designer with a flexible schedule and creative chaos on her desk, didn't fit into this militaristic system. "Molly, dear, you could at least wipe the crumbs off the table after your coffee," her mother-in-law would say in a saccharine sweet voice, passing by with a rag at the ready. "Ants will come. Or are you staring at your pictures again? And who will cook lunch? Alex will come home hungry. A man needs to be fed on time." Molly silently endured these reproaches. She tried to be the perfect daughter-in-law, waking up earlier to prepare breakfast, keeping her workspace spotless, cooking elaborate dinners from online recipes. But nothing was ever right for Dolores. The soup was too thin, the cutlets overcooked, and her work, sitting at a computer, wasn't considered serious at all. Alex turned into an invisible man at these moments. He loved both his wife and his mother, and the thought of conflict between them panicked him. He preferred to pretend nothing was happening. "Mom just cares about us," he would say in the evenings when Molly tried to talk. "She's used to controlling everything. That's just her nature. Don't pay attention." But ignoring it was impossible. Molly felt like an exhibit under a microscope. Every step, every purchase, every phone call was scrutinized. The first warning bell rang a week ago. Molly bought herself a new dress for an upcoming online conference. Not expensive, but stylish. That evening, as she tried it on, Dolores entered the room without knocking. "Oh, what do we have here? Some new clothes," she said, critically eyeing her daughter-in-law. "Pretty. Expensive, I suppose?" Molly blushed. Of course, her mother-in-law nodded. "You don't need to save for a mortgage. You sit at home, pressing buttons, and you can buy dresses. Meanwhile, my son bends his back at the factory to earn money for an apartment. She left, leaving Molly with the feeling that she had been caught committing a crime. She wanted to tell Alex, but he came home tired and irritated, so she decided not to make things worse. She increasingly stayed silent, burying her resentment deep inside. She didn't yet know that silence in this apartment was like a poison, slowly but surely poisoning her soul and her marriage. And soon, this poison would reach a critical concentration. With each passing day, the atmosphere in the apartment grew more oppressive. Dolores seemed determined to prove Molly's complete inadequacy. Her methods were sophisticated and struck at the most sensitive points. She never yelled. Her weapons were poisonous hints, condescending smiles, and icy silence. She could go hours without speaking to her daughter-in-law, deliberately addressing only her son, as if Molly were a void. She was especially irritated by Molly's work. The fact that her daughter-in-law could sleep until 8 instead of getting up with the roosters drove her crazy. In our day, she would begin her favorite breakfast monologue. Women were already at the factory by 5 in the morning, and then rushed home to feed the family. And now? They sit in their little offices, tapping away at keyboards, while their husbands break their backs. "Mom, Molly has a legitimate job," Alex tried to object. "She earns well." "Earns?" Dolores raised her eyebrows theatrically. "Is that earning?" "Just pocket money." "You still carry the main load, son." Molly silently sipped her coffee and stared out the window. Arguing was pointless. Any attempt to defend herself was seen as rudeness and disrespect to elders. Her only solace was the project she was currently working on, a major order from a German company to design for a hotel chain. The project was complex, responsible, but incredibly interesting. It demanded complete concentration. But what kind of concentration was possible when her mother-in-law barged into her room every half hour under the pretext of dusting and started commenting on everything she saw on the screen? "Oh, what's this squiggle?" she would ask, pointing at the monitor. "And people actually pay for this?" Molly gritted her teeth and politely explained that it was an element of corporate branding. She felt precious time slipping through her fingers. Deadlines were pressing, yet she couldn't work peacefully for even an hour. One day, after yet another visit from her mother-in-law, Molly decided to treat herself. She took the treasured bottle of verbena perfume from her cosmetic bag. One light spritz on her wrist, and the room filled with a fresh, invigorating scent. She closed her eyes, and for a moment, it felt like she was back in her grandmother's garden, safe and calm. This scent was her little secret, her personal antidepressant. She hadn't accounted for one thing: Dolores had the nose of a seagull. "What's that smell?" she asked at dinner, sniffing. "Some kind of chemical lemon." "It's my perfume," Molly replied softly. "Perfume?" Her mother-in-law grimaced. "I thought it was an air freshener." "Too strong. Alex is allergic to smells like this." Alex, calmly eating his cutlet, looked up in surprise. "Me? I've never heard that. I actually like it." "Then you just haven't noticed," Dolores cut in. "You've had a sensitivity since childhood. As a mother, I can feel it. Molly, be kind and don't use that stinker anymore. For my son's health." Molly remained silent. She knew Alex had no allergy. It was yet another method of control, another attempt to take something personal and precious away from her. That evening, she spoke via video call with her mother, Miranda. Her mother lived in Detroit, and they rarely saw each other, but they called almost every day. "How are you, darling?" Miranda asked, studying Molly's face on the screen. "You look pale." Just tired, Molly replied, trying to smile. The project is complicated. Is it only the project? Her mother asked insightfully. Isn't your mother-in-law bothering you? Molly hesitated. She didn't want to complain or upset her mother, but the tension of the past months demanded release. She told her about the constant monitoring, the reproaches, and today's deodorant incident. Miranda listened in silence. Molly, she said when her daughter finished. You're an adult woman, you shouldn't let anyone treat you this way. He's your husband, your family, but your dignity belongs to you as well. What can I do, Mom? Molly sighed. 'Cause a scandal, pack my things, and leave? We're saving for an apartment. An apartment is important, her mother agreed. But no apartment in the world is worth your peace of mind. Talk to Alex. Seriously. Explain to him that this cannot continue. He has to make a choice. He won't be able to, Molly said bitterly. He's afraid of her. Then you'll have to become stronger than both of them, Miranda said firmly. Otherwise, they'll simply break you. This conversation left a heavy mark. Molly realized her mother was right. Something had to change, but she didn't know how. She felt weak and alone. That night, she again took the little bottle her grandmother had given her. She simply held it in her hands, inhaled the familiar scent, and remembered her grandmother's words, "Never let anyone trample on what's dear to you, my little one." Not a thing, not a feeling, not yourself. She fell asleep holding the bottle, not yet knowing that tomorrow she would have to fight for her dignity, and that the battle would begin with the dirtiest and most humiliating attack she could ever imagine. In the morning, Molly woke up with an inexplicable sense of anxiety. The sun was shining through the window, birds were singing, yet her mood was overcast. She reached for the bedside table, where her treasured little bottle always sat. It wasn't there. Her heart skipped a beat. She quickly searched the table, looked under the bed, checked the cosmetic bag on the vanity. The deodorant was nowhere to be found. "Alex, have you seen my deodorant?" she asked her husband, who was just stepping out of the shower. "The one in the glass bottle." "No idea," he shrugged, drying his hair with a towel. "Maybe you left it in the bathroom?" She rushed to the bathroom, searched all the shelves and cabinets. Empty. Panic began to rise in her throat. This wasn't just a missing item, it was an intrusion into her personal space. She remembered clearly placing the bottle on the bedside table last night. Returning to the room, she saw Dolores methodically making their bed. Her mother-in-law did this every morning, believing that her daughter-in-law was incapable of doing it properly, without a single crease. "Dolores, have you seen my deodorant?" Molly asked, trying to keep her voice calm. Without turning, her mother-in-law continued straightening the bedspread. "What deodorant, dear?" "You have a whole row of them on the shelf. The one with the verbena scent. In the glass bottle." Dolores finally turned. A strange, inscrutable smile was on her face. "I saw it." "And where is it?" "There." Molly froze, bewildered. What did they mean? She searched the entire room again, peering into the farthest corners. In vain. Her thoughts raced. Maybe she had moved it somewhere and forgotten. No, she was certain. She went to the kitchen, where Alex was already having breakfast and Dolores was pouring tea. "Alex, I can't find my deodorant," she said, her voice already tinged with desperation. "Your mother says she saw it, but won't say where." "Mom," Alex said wearily, "didn't you take Molly's bottle?" "I don't take other people's things," Dolores replied with dignity, placing a cup in front of her son. "I just tidied up. Some things weren't in their proper place." And what is the proper place for a deodorant? Molly couldn't hold back. A good deodorant belongs on the bathroom shelf. And a bad one, she paused meaningfully, somewhere else. Her words felt like a slap. Molly felt her face flush. What do you mean? Exactly what I said. Not every chemical belongs in the home. At that moment, a terrible realization struck Molly. She remembered yesterday's conversation, the words her mother-in-law had used about the chemical smell. She rushed to the toilet. Her heart pounded so violently it felt as if it might leap out of her chest. She flung the door open and froze on the threshold. On the toilet tank, next to the air freshener, stood her bottle. Empty. The glass was sticky, and the toilet itself emitted a sharp, suffocating scent of lemon verbena mixed with the acrid smell of cleaning chemicals. Next to it, in a plastic cup, sat the toilet brush. It smelled of verbena too. Molly's world narrowed to this small, humiliating tableau. Her treasure, her memory of her grandmother, her personal intimate item had been used for the dirtiest work in the house. It wasn't just an insult, it was desecration. A symbolic act, showing what, in her mother-in-law's eyes, she was really worth. She picked up the empty sticky bottle. Her hands didn't shake. Inside, everything went cold and froze. She slowly turned and left the bathroom. In the kitchen, her husband and his mother were still sitting. They were waiting. Waiting for her reaction, her tears, her outburst. Molly entered. In her hand, she held the empty bottle as irrefutable evidence. She silently approached the table and placed it in front of her mother-in-law. Dolores glanced at the bottle with disdain and continued sipping her tea, as if nothing had happened. "What is this?" Molly asked quietly, but her voice had a metallic edge. Her mother-in-law set down her cup. "This, dear, is trash. The bottle is empty, it needs to be thrown away." It wasn't empty. More than half was left. So it evaporated, Dolores shrugged. Cheap perfume is like that, it doesn't last. Alex, who until then had been pretending to be engrossed in his scrambled eggs, lifted his head. "Mom, what are you saying?" "Molly, maybe you used it yourself and forgot." "I used it to clean the toilet." Molly shifted her gaze to her husband. "Are you serious?" She felt her blood boil. She had been humiliated, the most precious thing trampled, and these two were sitting there putting on a comedy. "Dolores, I'm asking you one last time," she said, looking her mother-in-law straight in the eyes. "Did you pour my deodorant into the toilet?" Her mother-in-law leaned back in her chair and laughed a dry, unpleasant laugh. "Well, let's say I did. So what? Why? What else am I supposed to clean the brush with?" She chuckled. "Yours just happens to smell like lemon. Very convenient. And it disinfects the toilet too, there's alcohol in it." Alex choked on his coffee. "Mom, are you serious? What's the big deal, sweetheart?" she asked innocently. "It's practically useless, allergenic. I'm just looking out for your health. At least this way, it does some good." Molly stared at this woman, unable to believe what was happening. This wasn't just meanness. It was a demonstration of absolute power and complete contempt. She didn't just destroy something, she showed Molly her place. The place of something dirty that could be flushed down the toilet. That was a gift from my grandmother," Molly said, her voice trembling. "The only thing I have left from her." "Oh, how sentimental we are," Dolores drawled. "Grandmothers, gifts, little bottles. You're an adult woman, and you still believe in fairy tales. In life, darling, real things matter: a home, family, your son's health. Not stinky deodorants. She said the last word with such disgust that Molly wanted to hit her. She clenched her fists, digging her nails into her palms. Alex. She turned to her husband, looking for support. Say something. Alex looked flustered and miserable. His eyes darted from his enraged wife to his impassive mother. Mom, why are you like this? He mumbled. It's Molly's thing. You should have asked. Asked permission to tidy up my own house? Dolores protested. Don't make me laugh. I'm the one in charge here, and I decide what's trash and what's not. It's not trash. Molly shouted. It's my memory, my soul. You've trampled my soul. Stop overreacting, Alex interjected, raising his voice. Mom just got carried away, it happens. It's only a little bottle, Molly. I'll buy you a new one, 100 times better. Only a little bottle. Her husband's words hurt more than her mother-in-law's act. He didn't understand or didn't want to understand. He devalued her feelings and her pain. He took his mother's side. In that very moment, something in their relationship broke for good. You won't buy anything, she said flatly. Because there are things that can't be bought. Silently, she picked up the empty bottle, turned, and went to her room. She heard her mother-in-law behind her, speaking triumphantly to her son. See, that's how you handle them. A little strictness, and they turn soft. They'll sulk, then stop. Molly closed the door and leaned against it. There were no tears. Only a scorched emptiness inside. She looked at her workspace. An unfinished project glowed on the monitor. German clients, strict deadlines, high expectations. She was supposed to work, create, and vent. But all her thoughts were paralyzed by humiliation. She sat at the desk and mechanically moved the mouse toward her. On the screen were beautiful interiors, luxurious hotels, a world of comfort and wealth. But in her own life, there wasn't even a small corner where she felt safe. She realized it couldn't go on like this. She couldn't work in such an environment, she couldn't live. Something had to be done. But what? Pack her things and leave? Where to? Back to a rented apartment, erasing all plans for a mortgage? Break up with Alex, the man she still loved despite everything? There were more questions than answers, and that sense of helplessness only grew. The next few days turned into a cold war. Molly almost stopped leaving her room, which she now saw as her last stronghold. She worked with relentless intensity, trying to escape into the world of design from the suffocating reality around her. She ventured out only to the kitchen to quickly prepare her meals, making sure to do so when her mother-in-law was out. Dolores, in turn, reveled in her victory. She spoke loudly and demonstratively to Alex, discussing Molly in the third person. There she goes again, sitting at the computer. Molly heard her voice through the door. Completely neglecting the family. Can't cook dinner, can't do the laundry. Lucky for you that I'm around, or you'd be covered in moss. Alex tried to reason with her, but it didn't go well. Mom, she's working. And she's upset with you. Upset? Snorted the mother-in-law. People don't get upset over the truth. I told her as it is. No need to make a tragedy out of junk. The pressure mounted. Dolores began nitpicking every little thing. Sometimes Molly typed too loudly, sometimes she spent too long in the bathroom or left wrong items on her shelf in the fridge. Yogurt without sugar? How disgusting. Normal people don't eat that. Alex was caught between two fires. He felt guilty toward Molly but couldn't confront his mother. In the evenings, he came to her room, sat on the edge of the bed, and tried to start a conversation. Molly, "Come on, stop sulking," he said. "Mom went too far, sure, but she didn't mean it. She's just an old-fashioned person." "She's a cruel person, Alex," Molly replied, not looking away from the monitor. "And you let her humiliate me." "I'll talk to her again," he promised. But these conversations led nowhere. Dolores was unyielding. The situation was made worse by work. The German clients were extremely demanding. They constantly requested changes, asking her to redo one thing after another. Molly worked herself to exhaustion, sleeping only 4 to 5 hours a night. The constant stress at home and at work drained her completely. She lost weight, dark circles formed under her eyes. She felt cornered. The mortgage they had been saving for now seemed like an impossible dream. Life in this house was becoming unbearable, and her husband proved not to be a stone wall, but a cardboard partition that crumbled at the slightest pressure. On Friday evening, while Molly was once again revising a presentation for clients, Dolores entered the room. She was dressed in her best suit, made up, and wearing perfume. "Alex and I are going to the theater," she announced from the doorway. "I have an extra ticket. His friend is sick." Molly silently looked at her. "And you?" Her mother-in-law assessed her with a glance. "I see, working again." "Well, work. Someone has to earn money in this family if the husband is going to theaters." She smirked and left. 5 minutes later, Molly heard the front door slam. They had gone together. Alex didn't even come to her, didn't warn her, didn't invite her along. He simply left with his mother, leaving her alone in the empty apartment. At that moment, Molly felt her patience snap. She sat before the flickering screen, realizing she couldn't take it anymore. She couldn't endure the humiliation, couldn't pretend everything was fine, couldn't live with someone who betrayed her so easily. She opened a new browser tab and started searching, rent an apartment in Chicago cheaply. Family law attorney. She didn't yet know exactly what she would do, but she knew one thing for certain: she wouldn't stay here any longer. While browsing listings, she came across a photo of a small but cozy apartment not far from the center. The price was reasonable. Molly looked at the photo and imagined arranging her furniture there, drinking coffee in the mornings in peace, without reproaches or lectures. That image gave her strength. But then another thought came: what about Alex? She still loved him. Or was it no longer love, but habit, attachment, pity? She closed her laptop. Her head was splitting. She needed to think things through, but first, finish the project. She reopened the presentation and forced herself to focus. Work was her only salvation, the only place where she was still in control of her life. But the pressure from all sides, from her mother-in-law, from her husband, from clients, was becoming unbearable. She felt that if it continued a little longer, she would simply explode. Saturday was supposed to be a day of silence and peace. Molly sent the final version of the project to the clients and, receiving their preliminary approval, felt an immense sense of relief. She decided to dedicate the entire day to herself, take a bath, read a book, watch her favorite movie. Alex, feeling guilty about yesterday's theater outing, was unusually kind. He brought her breakfast in bed and promised that no one would disturb her today. Dolores also seemed to decide to take a day off from her nagging. She left in the morning for shopping and only returned around lunchtime. But the truce was short-lived. In the evening, her mother-in-law announced that her sister, Aunt Gwen, and her husband would be visiting. "They're passing through Washington and decided to drop by," she said as if it were self-evident. "Molly, prepare something tasty. My signature salad and a hot dish." Molly looked at her wearily. She had neither the strength nor the desire to stand at the stove for uninvited guests. Dolores, I'm really tired. Maybe we could just order pizza? Pizza? Her mother-in-law exclaimed, flinging her hands in indignation. You suggest feeding my sister pizza? That's disrespectful. I haven't seen her in years. Mom, Molly really is tired, Alex intervened. I'll make something myself. You, Dolores gave her son a condescending glance, can't tell scrambled eggs from an omelet? No. Molly will cook. She's a woman, it's her duty. Molly realized arguing was pointless. She went to the kitchen and mechanically began chopping vegetables for the salad. Inside, she was boiling. She felt like a servant in her own home. Aunt Gwen and her husband, Uncle Billy, turned out to be loud and intrusive. From the moment they arrived, they began loudly discussing the apartment renovations, food prices, and politics. Molly silently set the table, trying to remain invisible. At the table, the conversation turned to family life. Looking at you young ones, I feel so happy, Aunt Gwen said, piling a huge portion of salad on her plate. Alex is lucky to have such a wife. Quiet, modest, and hard-working. Molly forced a smile. Oh, don't say, Dolores suddenly interjected with a sly grin. Our Molly has quite a character. She's got a temper. Really? Aunt Gwen exclaimed. I wouldn't have guessed. I'm telling you. Dolores clearly got into the spirit. She caused such a scandal the other day, the whole apartment was in an uproar. You want to know why? Because of a deodorant. Molly froze, fork in hand. The blood drained from her face. Alex tensed and shot his mother a pleading look, but she ignored him. Can you imagine? Dolores continued, addressing the guests, who listened with lively curiosity. She had some ridiculously expensive French bottle. Stinks to high heaven. I took it and cleaned the toilet with it. So what? Useless thing, at least it did some good. Uncle Billy snickered, and Aunt Gwen laughed aloud. Oh, Dolores, you really went for it. In the toilet. Well done. And you should have seen what happened. Dolores went on. Screaming, tears, accusations as if I'd thrown her family diamonds out the window. I said to her, Sweetie, it's just a bottle, a stinky thing. And she says to me, it's a memory of my grandmother. Isn't that ridiculous? She looked at Molly with openly gloating triumph. This was public humiliation, calculated, cruel, and deliberate. She didn't just tell a story, she made Molly a laughingstock in front of strangers, devalued her feelings, trampled her dignity. Molly slowly put down her fork. Her ears rang. She looked at her husband. Alex sat with his head sunk into his shoulders, smiling guiltily at the guests' jokes. He didn't say a single word in her defense. Not one. He allowed his mother to humiliate her. He betrayed her again. Excuse me, Molly said, her voice surprisingly steady. I'm not feeling well. I'll lie down. She stood and, without looking at anyone, left the table. Behind her, she heard Aunt Gwen's laughter and her mother-in-law's voice. See? So delicate. At the slightest thing, she faints. At that moment, Molly realized it was over. Not just her patients, but their marriage. Her life in this house. She would no longer be a victim. Enough was enough. Locking herself in her room, Molly didn't collapse on the bed in tears. She went to the window and looked out at the night city. Car lights, the glow of windows in neighboring buildings, the distant hum of the metropolis. Everything seemed unreal, like a set for her personal drama. She didn't feel pain. Didn't feel resentment. Inside, there was only a cold, ringing emptiness, as if someone had turned off all her emotions, leaving only the ability to observe and analyze. The humiliation at the table had been the final drop, overflowing the cup of her patience. But it wasn't about the words. It was Alex's silence. His guilty smile, his downcast eyes, his inability to utter a single word in her defense, that had become her sentence. He didn't just let her mother humiliate her. He became an accomplice in that humiliation. She remembered their conversation after the deodorant incident. "I'll talk to her," he promised. "I'll sort everything out." He didn't sort anything out. As always, he chose the easiest path. The path of inaction. He hid behind his immaturity, behind his fear of his mother, leaving her alone on the battlefield. Quiet, modest, domestic, Aunt Gwen's words echoed in her mind. That's how they wanted to see her. Convenient, silent, grateful that they even tolerated her, sitting at home pressing buttons, in this apartment. They didn't see her as a person. They saw a function of cook, cleaner, and, as it turned out, sponsor of their peace of mind, paid for with her nerves. She approached the mirror. A tired woman with a dull gaze looked back at her. A woman who had forgotten how to smile. A woman who had forgotten what self-respect felt like. Grandmother, gifts, rags, little bottles. Her mother-in-law's words were like poison. She intentionally struck at the deepest wound, because she associated Molly with her past, with her roots. Dolores instinctively sensed that Molly's strength lay in her inner wholeness and her attachment to family values. And she methodically destroyed that support, trying to turn Molly into the same cynical and empty creature she herself had become. Why? Envy, jealousy of her son, desire for total control? Probably all of it together. Molly remembered finding a photo of young Dolores in an old album. She was standing next to her husband, the father of Alex, whom Molly had never known. He had died when his son was 10. In that photo, her mother-in-law's eyes were frightened, hunted. Apparently, her own family life had not been happy. And now, having raised her son alone, she clung to him with a death grip, unwilling to let go and subconsciously destroying his own family so that he would remain only her boy forever. But understanding her mother-in-law's motives brought no relief. Molly sat on the bed. What to do next? Pack her things and leave right now? At night? To where? To her parents in Detroit? That would mean admitting defeat, renting an apartment. That required money, and all their savings were in a joint account with Alex. He wouldn't give them to her just like that. She felt trapped, physically, financially, emotionally. Footsteps sounded outside the door, followed by a soft knock. "Molly, it's me." "Please open," Alex's voice. She stayed silent. "Molly, please forgive me. I know, I acted like a coward, but what could I do? They're guests, my aunt." It was awkward to make a scene. Awkward, that word became the key for her. It was awkward for him to defend his wife. It was awkward for him to confront his mother. It was convenient for him that she stayed silent and endured. She stood and walked to the door, but not to open it. She listened to his voice, and with every word, a cold resolve grew inside her. "Come on, they'll leave and we'll discuss everything," he continued. "I'll talk to Mom, I promise." A promise. Empty, worthless words. She had heard them before. Molly stepped back from the door and sat at her desk. She turned on the computer. Her project appeared on the screen, beautiful, complex, requiring intelligence and talent. That was her. Something no one could take from her: professionalism, knowledge, the ability to create something from scratch. At that moment, looking at her work, she realized she was not weak. She was not a victim. She had just let others think so for too long. Played by their rules for too long. It was time to start her own game, and she knew what her first move would be. She remembered Dolores' greatest pride and, at the same time, her most vulnerable point, her greatest treasure. Her pride in the object of her relentless care was her hair. Thick, perfectly styled, with noble streaks of gray that she enhanced with special tinted shampoos. She spent a fortune on their care. The bathroom shelves were overflowing with expensive masks, conditioners, and serums. Once a week, on Sundays, she treated herself to a beauty day, a long bath and the application of a special, most precious hair mask. It was an exclusive balm her friend brought from Switzerland. A tiny jar cost as much as half of Molly's salary. Her mother-in-law kept it in the far corner of the cabinet like a sacred object and allowed no one to touch it. Molly knew about this ritual, and she knew that striking at this sacred object would be more terrifying for her mother-in-law than any scandal. After a sleepless night of reflection, Molly rose with the first rays of the sun. She felt rested and full of resolve. The plan was formed, cruel, perhaps, but fair. They wanted to humiliate her, trample her values. She would respond in kind. The guests left early in the morning, leaving behind a pile of dirty dishes and the feeling of a ransacked apartment. Dolores walked around with the air of a victor, occasionally casting triumphant glances at Molly. Alex looked dejected, avoiding his wife's gaze, and spent the whole morning trying to make up for his guilt with small favors, bringing coffee, washing dishes. Molly accepted his apologies with icy calm. She waited until her mother-in-law went to the store for supplies for her Sunday ritual. Alex sat in the living room, glued to the television. Molly quietly slipped into the bathroom. There was the cherished jar. White, with a gold lid and a simple French inscription. Molly opened it. The thick, pearly balm smelled of herbs and something expensive, salon quality. She went to her room and retrieved a small vial from her medicine cabinet. Ordinary brilliant green antiseptic. Her grandmother had always said it was the best remedy for scratches. And, as it turned out, not just for that. Her hands did not tremble. She returned to the bathroom and carefully, drop by drop, began adding the antiseptic to the balm. She mixed it all with a cotton swab. The bright green liquid completely dissolved into the thick mass, slightly changing its hue to a pale pistachio. Imperceptible unless you looked closely. But the effect was meant to be stunning. She put the jar back and stepped out of the bath, washing her hands thoroughly. Her heart pounded with anticipation. This wasn't just a petty prank. This was an act of retribution. She felt like the heroine of a novel, preparing poison for her enemy. Only her poison was safe for health, but deadly to pride. The rest of the day she behaved as usual. She talked to her mother on the phone, assuring her everything was fine, worked on her project, even prepared a light lunch. Alex watched her calmness with surprise, apparently assuming she had cooled down and forgiven them. He had no idea that an icy fire raged inside her. In the evening, as expected, Dolores announced that she was starting her procedures. "Don't bother me for an hour," she said, heading to the bathroom with a towel on her head. Molly and Alex stayed in the kitchen. He tried to start a conversation, apologized again, promised it would never happen again. Molly listened half-heartedly, paying attention to the sounds from the bathroom. The water began to murmur, then her mother-in-law muttered something to herself. Time dragged on agonizingly. Molly felt the tension mounting. What if it didn't work? What if her mother-in-law noticed the substitution, or the effect wasn't strong enough? She forced herself to finish her tea. "Alex," she said, her voice perfectly calm, "I think we need to separate." He choked. What, Molly, are you joking? No. I'm filing for divorce. But why? I apologized. I understand now. You understand nothing, Alex. You were just scared. And you'll never change. You will always choose your mother over me. That's not true. It is. I don't want to live like this anymore. She spoke the words, but her mind was elsewhere. She was putting an end to their relationship even before the explosion occurred. She wanted him to understand her decision did not depend on the outcome of her little revenge. It had been made yesterday, the moment he remained silent. Then a sound came from the bathroom. First, a quiet, surprised exclamation, then a heart-stopping, terrified scream full of horror and disbelief. A scream that seemed to make the glass tremble. Alex jumped up. What? What's wrong with Mom? He ran to the bathroom. Molly rose slowly and followed him. The performance was beginning. The bathroom door was unlocked. Alex yanked it open and froze at the threshold, struck dumb. Molly peeked over his shoulder. Dolores stood before the mirror. On her head, instead of her usual elegant gray hairstyle, was something unimaginable. Her hair was wet and dyed a toxic green, unevenly, in patches, like a molting cat. Green drops ran down her face and neck, mixing with tears. She looked at her reflection with an expression of absolute horror. What? What is this? She rasped. Turning to them, her face was twisted in a grimace of despair. My hair, what happened to my hair? She brought a trembling hand to her head, touched a green strand, and screamed even louder. Mom, calm down, Alex rushed to her. What happened? My bomb. She wailed. It was weird somehow. I applied it, and then this. She pointed at the jar on the edge of the tub. Alex grabbed it, opened it, sniffed. Smells normal, look. They're green. I'm green. How am I supposed to show myself to people now? I have a meeting with former colleagues tomorrow. She screamed. She covered her face with her hands, a full-blown hysteria. She flailed around the tiny bathroom, clutching her head and smearing green tears across her face. Alex tried to calm her, but she didn't hear him. He looked at Molly, standing in the doorway with complete composure, utterly unshaken. Molly, do you know what this could be? Maybe an allergy. He stammered. Molly slowly stepped into the bathroom. She approached her sobbing mother-in-law and examined her new hairstyle carefully. She said thoughtfully. Really green. A very original shade. Spring-like. Dolores stopped screaming and stared at her daughter-in-law with disbelief. You did this? She exhaled. What, Dolores? Molly raised her eyebrows in mock surprise. How could you even think that? It's you? I know. This is your revenge for the deodorant. Revenge? Molly pretended to ponder deeply. Well, if we reason according to your logic, then yes, I suppose. You used my stuff to clean the toilet, and I apparently used yours to freshen up your image. She smiled a calm, icy smile. Alex glanced between his wife and his mother, and it seemed like it was finally starting to sink in. Molly, he whispered, did you put something in her bomb? I just tidied it up, she replied, echoing her mother-in-law's own words. Some things, in my opinion, were too dull. I added a little color. You're insane. Dolores screeched. I'll call the police. I'll ruin you. What property? Molly asked innocently. Hair isn't property. It will grow back. And besides, she looked her mother-in-law straight in the eyes. No need to get so upset. It's just hair. Not worth the tears. She repeated Dolores' phrase from yesterday word for word, and it had more effect than shouting. Dolores went silent, her face elongated. She looked at Molly with a mix of hatred and fear. She realized that this quiet, modest girl she had tormented for so long was capable of such a cold, calculated strike. "Get out of my house," she hissed. "Now." With pleasure, Molly nodded. "I was just about to." She turned to her stunned husband. "Alex, you have half an hour to decide who you're with. Your mother, with her green hair and poisonous personality, or me. If you choose me, pack only the essentials. Yes, and we leave immediately to a rented apartment, anywhere. If you stay here, consider that you no longer have me." She walked out of the bathroom, leaving him alone with his sobbing, green-haired mother. She went to her room and retrieved the bag she had packed in advance. She no longer doubted herself. She knew she had done the right thing. This wasn't just revenge, it was a declaration of independence. She showed them she would no longer allow herself to be humiliated. She was no longer a victim. She was a player. And she had just made her decisive move. Molly sat on the bed in her room and waited. The bag with her essentials stood by the door. From the bathroom came muffled sobs from Dolores and Alex's stammering, calming voice. She couldn't hear the words, but she could imagine the conversation. He was probably promising her that it would all wash out, that he'd buy her the best wig in the world, that he would punish the witch. And she, in turn, demanded that he immediately throw his wife out and never let her through the door again. 10 minutes passed, 20, 30. Molly watched the clock. Her ultimatum had expired. He hadn't come. That meant he had made his choice. She felt a pang of pain, the last one, she thought. It was expected. But it still hurt. She stood, took her bag, and headed for the apartment door. As she passed the bathroom, the door opened. Alex stood in the doorway, his face pale and worn. "You're leaving?" he asked quietly. "And where?" "That's no longer your business." He blocked her way. "Molly, wait, don't go. Let's talk. We've already said everything to each other. Alex, you made your choice." "I didn't make a choice," he cried desperately. "I was trying to calm Mom. She's in shock." "And I'm not in shock?" Molly asked, looking him in the eyes. "When she humiliated me at the table yesterday, I was in shock too. When I found my deodorant in the toilet, I was in shock. But you didn't seem to care much." "That's different." "No, Alex, it's the same thing. Only this time, she's the victim." "And you don't like it?" From the depths of the bathroom came Dolores's whiny voice. "Sonny, she's leaving. Let her go. With the tablecloth, it's expensive. We don't need a snake like that in the house." Alex flinched and threw a frightened glance over his shoulder. "See," Molly smirked. "Mom decided everything for you. As always." She tried to pass him, but he grabbed her hand. "Molly, don't I'll go with you." She stopped and looked at him with distrust. "What do you mean I'll go with you?" he repeated. And in his voice was such a plea that she almost felt sorry for him. "You're right. I can't do this anymore. I can't live between you two. I choose you." From the bathroom came Dolores's outraged voice. "What are you saying? You're betraying your own mother?" Alex squeezed his eyes shut as if in physical pain. "Mom, stop," he said without turning around. "This is your own fault." "My fault?" Dolores appeared in the doorway, wrapped in a bathrobe with a towel on her head, from under which poison green strands poked out. My fault for wanting the best for you. For letting that viper into our house. She is my wife, Mom, and you pushed her to this, and now she's leaving, and I'm leaving with her. Dolores looked at her son as if he had struck her. Her face contorted. Oh, I see, so I raised you, stayed up nights, did everything for you, and you traded me for that girl. Stop insulting her. Alex shouted at her for the first time in his life. His mother recoiled. She clearly hadn't expected such resistance from her obedient, controlled son. Fine, she ground through her teeth. Go, roll off to your witch, but remember, there's no going back. You won't get a cent from me. And don't you dare set foot in this apartment again. She turned and slammed the bathroom door with a crash. Alex stood in the middle of the hallway, breathing heavily. He looked as if he had just run a marathon. Let's go, he said, taking Molly's hand. Quickly, before she changes her mind. He ran to their room, grabbed a backpack, threw in a laptop, some documents, and a couple of sweaters. 5 minutes later, they were already standing on the stair landing. The apartment door slammed behind them, cutting off their past life. They descended in silence. Outside, it was gray and damp. Where to now? Alex asked, looking around in confusion. To my place? Molly replied. I have a mom. She lives in Detroit, but she has an old grandmother's apartment here in Chicago. Empty. We can stay there for a while. She called a taxi. They rode in silence. Molly stared out the window at the passing houses, while Alex sat with his head down. She didn't know what he was feeling, relief, fear, or remorse. When they entered the old, mothball-scented grandmother's apartment, he finally spoke. Molly, forgive me. For what exactly, Alex? She asked wearily. The list is pretty long. For everything. For being a coward, for not protecting you, for letting her treat you that way. I really love you. I know, Molly nodded. But sometimes love alone isn't enough. She wasn't sure she could forgive him. She wasn't sure their marriage could be saved. He had taken a step toward her, but it was only the first step. Ahead lay a long, difficult road, and they would have to walk it by new rules, rules that she would now set. 6 months passed. Chicago summer was in full swing, flooding the streets with sunlight and the scent of blooming linden trees. Molly sat in the small but cozy kitchen of their rented apartment, drinking coffee. The grandmother's apartment had been too steeped in the past, so after discussing it, they decided to rent their own place, small but neutral. It was a joint decision, the first of many they now made together. Life slowly settled into a new rhythm. Their relationship with Alex was like rebuilding a damaged house. They reconstructed trust brick by brick. It wasn't easy. Molly often had nightmares in which her mother-in-law repeatedly poured her deodorant into the toilet. And Alex had changed. He had found the strength to separate himself from his mother. After they left, Dolores tried to get him back. She called, sent messages, sometimes full of tears, sometimes full of threats. She even showed up at their new apartment, but Alex didn't let her pass the threshold. Mom, he said firmly at the time, we will communicate, but only when you understand that Molly is my wife and that you must respect her. Until then, I'm sorry, but it's better for us to keep our distance. It was a long and painful process. Alex started seeing a psychologist to sort out his relationship with his mother and learn to establish personal boundaries. Molly saw how hard it was for him, but she was proud of him. He was finally becoming a man, not just a mama's boy. Dolores dealt with her hair. She had to cut it short and dye it dark to hide the remaining green strands. Rumor had it, she didn't leave the house for a long time, embarrassed by the shame. But eventually, life went on. She began meeting friends again, though the old self-confidence, people said, had left her. Molly successfully finished her German project. The clients were thrilled and offered her a long-term contract. Now she was financially independent and confident about the future. She no longer felt fear. One morning, getting ready for work, she didn't find her usual deodorant on the shelf. Her heart skipped a beat, a pang of anxiety taking her back to that terrible day. "Don't worry," Alex said, coming out of the bathroom. "I didn't touch it." He handed her a small gift bag. Molly opened it. Inside was a bottle exactly like the one she had before, with the scent of lemon verbena. "I found it online," Alex said, looking into her eyes. "Ordered it from France. I know it won't replace the one from Grandma, but I want you to have a new one, as a symbol of a new life." Tears welled up in her eyes. But these were no longer tears of hurt and humiliation. They were tears of relief and timid hope. She took the bottle, heavy and cool, and sprayed a bit on her wrist. The same fresh, slightly bitter scent. The smell of her childhood, and the smell of her new future. She didn't know if they could fully restore their marriage. The scars remained, but she knew they were both trying very hard, and perhaps that was enough. That evening, Alex came home from work holding 2 tickets. "Remember, you wanted to go to the theater?" He smiled. Molly looked at the tickets, then at him, and for the first time in months, smiled back at him, sincerely, warmly, without a shadow of doubt. "I remember. Let's go." She knew that the deodorant incident would forever remain in her memory as the cruelest yet most important lesson of her life. A lesson that no one should be allowed to humiliate you, and that you must fight for your dignity. And a lesson that sometimes, to save love, you first have to destroy everything to the foundation and then patiently rebuild something new and real on the ruins. She hoped this story would resonate in the hearts of her listeners and give them faith that even from the most humiliating situation, one could emerge victorious if they found the strength to stand up for themselves.